For our next story, let's go back in history. It was July 1944. The world was still at war. The Second World War was on. But far from the battlefields, a meeting was underway in the quiet town of Bretton Woods in the US. Representatives from 44 nations had gathered there, and their mission was quite simple: to rebuild a shattered global economy. This conference gave birth to two institutions, the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, and the World Bank. They would shape global finance for decades to come, and at the helm of it was one nation, the United States of America. It established itself as a leader in global financial governance. But 8 decades later, the US wants a review of its role in the IMF and the World Bank. This is in line with what is written in Project 2025, which is a right-wing playbook to reshape the US federal government. Now, this project calls the IMF and the World Bank expensive middlemen. It suggests that the US should exit them. So is that the next stop or the next step for Washington, D.C.? What will that exit mean for the world, and will China look to fill this gap? Let's look at these institutions first. Look at what they do. The IMF serves as a financial lifeline, especially for nations in distress. It has bailed out multiple countries, the likes of Greece, Argentina, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. It has stepped in when economies crashed and debts piled up. Its support varies from emergency bailouts to precautionary credit lines. But IMF aid is never free. Its loans come with conditions, forcing countries to make tough reforms and often plunging them into deeper crisis and political instability. Now, the US holds unparalleled influence in the IMF. It is the largest contributor with around $117 billion committed. This makes Washington the biggest shareholder, with 16.5% voting share in the IMF. That's America's voting share, 16.5%. For any key IMF decision, you need 85% majority. The US has 16.5%. Essentially, the US can veto any decision or reform at the IMF. Now let's look at the World Bank. The World Bank lends money at a low rate to poorer countries. This money is used for everything from development projects to financial tools. The World Bank has one main lender. Now, the US is the biggest shareholder here too. It controls around 16% of the vote. It has also historically appointed the World Bank's president. So American influence runs deep. And let's be clear, this is not about charity. America's involvement goes far beyond economics. It is a strategic tool, a lever of power and persuasion for the Americans. Historically, the US has used these institutions to serve three purposes: rewarding allies, pressuring adversaries, and stabilizing regions which are vital to American interests. For example, Iraq and Afghanistan, nations reduced to rubble by US military interventions. And who footed the bill for their reconstruction? The IMF and the World Bank. So what happens if the US exits these bodies? The first problem will be funding. Without Washington, there will be a deficit in funds. Other major economies will need to step up, or the IMF and World Bank will have to scale back. Their assistance will be affected. They won't be able to lend the kind of money they do right now. The second problem will be a power vacuum. Who will fill this gap left by an American exit? There's only one country that's vying for this position, and that country is China. Beijing accounts for 18% of the global economy, but its share in the IMF is a little over 6%. So China has long rallied for more influence. An American exit gives Beijing the perfect opportunity. It can push for reforms to suit its needs. China can tilt the global financial governance in its favor. It can prioritize BRI partners. It can soften conditions linked to financial assistance. It can use these bodies for its own gain, just like the US has done for years. And where does that leave the world? A US exit would rewrite the rules of global finance and further disrupt the global financial order.
Merci beaucoup. Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Namaste, Mr. President.
Bharat Kelogan, Komeri Namaste.
How many people generally follow you in interviews?
Typically, in a month, we have viewers up to 150 million. That's more than twice the population of France. And in the last 2 years, we had 3 billion viewers. So I say, Laurent, this is your chance to be famous. You're on Firstpost. One word to describe your equation with Prime Minister Modi.
Amitié.
As India and France work together, are you creating a new era of non-alignment in the technology space?
India is a training superpower. 1 million engineers a year, more than all of Europe and the US combined. So we have that partnership. We have a partnership on the environment and the economy. We also have civilian nuclear programs, and that is something we've developed far beyond the France-India relationship. So we want to work together on AI.
And then comes China with its DeepSeek, creating models at a fraction of the cost. Did that innovation take you by surprise? Did that breakthrough make you sit up and think, what did the Chinese do and how?
But what did DeepSeek do? They took everything that was already available from the last AI model, and then they recalibrated it.
So are you going to ban Chinese AI in France?
So we don't have this American approach of banning tech because of where it comes from.